Hello, this is the FreeSoul podcast. My name is And, yes, and I am here with one of my favorite people and one of my favorite poets. It's rare that they get to be the exact same person, and I'm here with him today. This is JRowe, Jeanette Rowe. Please say hi to the people.
Well, hello, beautiful people.
And I guess I've got the big question to ask you first, which is, how's your day been?
My day has been, it's been great.
It's been great. She said very convincingly for everyone to believe. We don't need to get into it too much. There's a lot of things going on in your life at the moment.
Yeah.
Which kind of feeds into a theme that I want to discuss. I wanted to try having a bit of a theme with these podcasts. So the theme of the day is tension. Because what I've noticed is with your poetry, and I don't know if it's a conscious thing, I've noticed that a lot of writers tend to just do it without really consciously thinking about it. You play with tension in your poetry beautifully. And by tension, I don't just mean like you're angry and then joyful, but the pacing of how you speak and how you break it up with, like, for a great example is in the Tell 'em poem, how Tell 'em is always the reset point. And then you ramp up, and then you reset with Tell 'em you matter. And I guess when it comes to poetry, is that tension important to you? Is that something you actively go for? Or is that something you just naturally fall into?
That's so funny. I just naturally fall into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that is just what naturally I think it kind of reflects life. Everything is ebb and flow, and at some point you have to reset. So I think it tends to kind of manifest in my art.
Yeah, and I've noticed I do it when I'm writing personally when I just can't think of where to go next.
Yeah.
So is that like a tactic? Yeah. Because when you get stuck with your writing, what do you do besides that?
Yeah. So that's funny. We were just talking about it. I kind of just set it aside, and I'll either just sit and listen to some dope music or try to read something creative. But if nothing comes out, then nothing comes out.
Yeah. But, well, I mean, cue me more into like the Jeanette world, because what do you listen to? Put me in like your mood. What do you read? What do you listen to break yourself of that?
That's such a great question. So lately, usually lots of hip hop. I really am digging Sylvan LaCue. I really appreciate the vulnerability behind his work. It's very open, and it's a very sensitive kind of work of art, but there's this grittiness, this rawness to it. It feels very honest. So that's really inspirational. So I'd say Isaiah Rashad is another one. Same, just keeping it really honest, but also addressing feelings, right? That's stuff that's going on inside. In terms of reading, I'm really open, but like I said, when I get stuck, I'll try to go to something creative. So I just picked up the book, How Long Until, I think it's Black Future Month or something like that. It's a sci-fi piece or novel, so it's a little different for me, but I'm excited to kind of like stretch my imagination with it.
Oh, so what's it about? Give me the breakdown.
So I guess it's like she's between, it's essentially different tenses, so like past, present, future. I don't know the details about it yet.
Yeah, you're still journeying through it.
Still, yeah. And I just kept hearing a lot of good things about it, so I was like, yeah, let's give it a spin. But yeah, in terms of what else will inspire me, any poetry. So whether that's like YouTube, whether it's reading something, as you know, Saul Williams is like my go-to, and you know why.
Yeah, the part. So for those of you who don't know, I had some technical issues I've been having with the podcast, and we tried to do this once. And I'm like, you know what? Let me upgrade my equipment. Let me get it back on track, and then come back to it. So the first time we talked about the fact that in 2018, right, at the California Democratic Convention, which we got to do, you got introduced to Saul Williams, which blew my mind because your style is so reminiscent of him. And what did you think when you first listened to Saul?
I was honestly just so taken aback by the balance he has between there's this eloquence, but then there's this realness, this rawness to it. So he'll use these beautiful metaphors and then he'll say the N-word, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just like it feels very real to me.
Yeah.
And he's very grand on stage in a way that doesn't feel over the top. It just feels very powerful. So that was really cool to see. And also he has such a unique look, honestly, to be really honest. Yeah.
Yeah, I've never really seen him wearing the same thing, like in terms of how he physically looks.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And he plays with like all kind, like I feel like his style is pretty fluid too. Like he doesn't get caught up in like, this is what guys wear. Like,
Well, how would you describe your style?
ooh, yeah. I'd say in terms of like tools and things I use, repetition is huge for me. And I think that goes back to like that resetting. And then also just trying to really reiterate my point, right? So repetition, metaphors, right? Obviously, I'm a poet. But I am also, if I'm being quite honest, if I'm being,
a line from a poem.
if I'm being honest, I'm really actually working on not hiding behind metaphors so much.
What do you mean by hiding behind metaphors?
It's really easy to say, thoughts from a foreign moon whisper wishes, right? Versus I have all these effing voices in my head and I can't freaking sleep and I've been up all night and here's why, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a little bit easier.
Yeah, kind of touches on the idea of academic poetry versus practical, like things that anyone could read. As a journalist, I appreciate that thought because I used to be an editor, and I had writers more than once complain about the fact that we feel like we're dumbing down our writing. We feel like we're making it dumb because we have to make it everybody be able to understand it. I'm like, no, there's a beautiful art in the fact that you can create something that anyone, no matter how complex it is. And what you're talking about with the idea of being a Black woman in America is a very complicated subject for a lot of America. And to be able to break that down so beautifully is an art form within itself, and a beautiful one. Yeah.
I'm smiling.
And it's true. I feel like you kind of have the same problem that I do, which is the taking a compliment.
Yes.
Could be a little bit weird, and you kind of tense up. How long has that been like an issue? Has that been just like a lifelong thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. So we're gonna work on it.
We're working on it. That's right.
Here we go.
This is gonna be a challenge for this podcast. When I compliment you, or you compliment me, you don't have to. That's not like I'm not trying to trigger you, but like also like, if you want to, like whatever. When you get complimented, take it.
Just take it.
Take it.
Okay.
We're gonna work on this together because I'm gonna do the same shit.
Coming in hot.
Because you're a beautiful poet, and I don't just mean like physically. You're a physically radiant human being, but the words that you have to speak are valid, worth speaking, and are spoken in a way that anybody can relate to on subject matters that are typically not discussed nearly enough in our country, which pulls me into a discussion I wanted to have with you. In a poem, I can't remember which one, please remind me of it. The line is something to the point of, I speak on being a woman, I speak on being a Black woman, I speak on being a woman and Black, or
Yeah.
I'm getting it wrong completely.
No, you're not.
What's the line and what's the poem?
I speak on being a woman. I speak on being a Black woman. I speak on how I'm never sure on which one to prioritize.
Yeah, and I guess me being not Black and not a woman, could you break that down for me? Because I feel like there's a distinction between being a woman and being Black, and then the combination of those two things in terms of the complication of your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think anytime you're talking about like any like intersectional identity type situations, like it gets tricky, right? So for me, it's that it's kind of, everything has layers. Because like even talking about feminism, like it was not initially meant for Black women, right? Well, feminism is historically speaking always been more so for white women. So like, there's that battle there because of course you're fighting for like equal rights in terms of gender, but then there's like, okay, wait, there's also still this divide. Am I on the same playing field? It's still a different struggle.
Yeah, and just to get at what you're referencing to for listeners who might not know, the right for women to vote was given to white women first before Black women. And that's kind of what you're touching on there. Just wanted to put that out there. Sorry.
No, you're good. And I'll be very vulnerable with this interview. So even talking about being a woman, being Black, and then there's also, stepping into like my queer identity too, right? So you always wonder like, hey, is there room for my Blackness within the realms of feminism? Is there room for my sexuality within the realm of Blackness? It's just incredibly layered. So those are the types of things that I try to address because it's like, it almost feels like you have to pick your battle. But different parts of yourself are allowed to exist at the same time. So it's just a lot trying to figure out how do you let those shine without letting other people kind of, impose their ideologies on you and make you feel like you're not enough.
Yeah, and it gets into kind of the idea of code switching.
Ha!
Which we've talked about a few times, all podcast things aside. And here's a real simple example of it when we talk about code switching. When I worked for Apple, I was a tech support advisor, and here's my tech support advisor voice. Hi, welcome to Apple. My name is David. How can I help you today? I try to make myself sound not Cuban, not like someone with depression, not like anything.
Yeah.
That's an example of code switching there. I guess, how often do you feel like you have to code switch?
Oh my goodness. Yo, every day.
Every day?
Every day.
Like once a day or
like all day. Essentially from the moment, especially when we're talking about in the workplace, right? But what I'm learning is you can still code switch and be authentic. Yeah, it just takes practice.
How do you do that?
Well, I still hang on to my values and share things that I enjoy doing. And then it's just like little things. Like, for instance, if you were to walk into my office, it's BLM, it's Black Panther, it's, it's all kinds of, you'll see all kinds of stuff in there. So it's like people understand what I'm about. I don't need to, and unfortunately the measuring stick white culture is the dominant culture. And I think when we hear code switching, we tend to default to that voice you were just using, right?
Yeah. It's also the voice I use for cops when I get pulled over.
That part.
And it gets me out of many a ticket.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised by the number of times that I get a ticket when I don't do it.
Yeah. But what code switching does, it allows you to kind of bridge the gap between cultures. Yeah. Honestly, right?
And not that I get a ticket every weekend, just to be clear.
Remember the one you got yesterday?
Shh, don't tell him. God, I'm an upstanding citizen.
No. Yeah. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it absolutely does. Because again, it's one of those discussions that we don't have nearly enough. We have the idea in society, I feel like, of like, it's hard to be a Black woman because society, but we never dig deeper into that of like, practically, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like even from what I understand, at least a lot of the time for Black people in general and for Hispanic people who present in a way that stereotypically would be considered Hispanic or Latinx or whatever, even going into a store can be complicated. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever, because I've noticed even I've been like followed a couple times.
Oh, yeah. 100.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the Black lady with the little fro walking around. I look different, right? Yeah, so it's so interesting, like, kind of going back to why we code switch. A lot of a lot of it is, we are trying to avoid affirming those negative stereotypes. We are trying to achieve upward mobility, right? So there's so much that goes into it. So when something like you being followed in a store happens, it's, it gets confusing. And so you have to think about which part of yourself are you going to activate? Yeah. And that to me is the art of code switching.
Interesting. Yeah. And because it could be hard, because at that point you're faced with the idea of you can't really confront the person who's following you, or else you come off as crazy, aggressive, etc. But also you're, by your silence and not saying anything about it, you're seen as being okay to do this.
Exactly.
I guess, is there a balance for that for you?
Absolutely. So I've always taken the stance of kill them with kindness when you can. So for instance, if that were to happen, I would say, oh, I'm sorry. I might have looked like I needed help. I don't. I'm good. Thank you so much, though, which is just a cue for them to like, hey, I see you following me. Please stop. Right. Yeah. Because then and they know you see them. Right. So like, let's just stop. Yeah. Right. I don't need to turn around and cuss you out and tell you ain't shit, even though like you kind of aren't. Right. It's not going to help anything. Yeah. Yeah.
And it really speaks to a certain level of your personal growth and self-acceptance. Yeah, I got it right.
Yeah.
I guess, and that's a whole other path that you've been on for, as long as I've known you, certainly. Since the first time that I saw you at the outdoor open mic, most open mic in the city, and you were the quiet person who was speaking your poems like this into your little book, and you were just like, okay. And up until now, and I guess what triggered this self-growth? Because when you go on stage now versus when you started, you are a force.
Thank
period. You. Like, every time I see you, I'm like, damn, I want more.
Thank you.
And I'm not the only one. Like, yeah.
Look, I took the compliments.
You did. No, I'm proud of you.
I also announced it, so there's
I mean, hey, we're working baby steps. Baby steps.
Yeah. It's funny. I was talking to a friend, Andrew, a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about growth, and it really comes down to this, which is either you do the work or you get worked. It's up to you, right? And so I think what you have seen kind of transpire on stage over the past couple of years is me being really intentional about speaking my truth.
Yeah.
That's like what every performance has to be rooted in. Yeah. If it doesn't feel real, if it doesn't feel like my truth, it's trash. Yeah.
Yeah. And does it get down to even choosing what poem you want for a particular night? Like, maybe you feel this one a little bit more? Or...
Yeah. So it's funny because, like, the more, I guess, experience I get, the more I'm okay with having kind of like, well, okay, I'm really, like, I feel like I'm in a great space for, like, any three of these could work. So then I kind of wait until, either, the slam or like, what am I feeling? What am I really feeling? And I go from there. Yeah. It's a nice balance because it's like you can still prepare and have like your practice, but you're not like stuck with these poems, right? Because if I'm having a wonderful, lovely week and it's all butterflies and sunshine, like I might want to spit my joy piece.
Yeah.
But if it's a shitty day and, I feel like I need to yell and go ham, I'm going to spit the N-word.
and it gets into kind of what we were talking about at the start with this idea of playing with tension, even within your own self a little bit.
Yeah.
Which is beautiful. And you have this ability to deliver a piece. And I'm going to praise incoming. So a lot of spoken word poets, especially in the slam scene, they know how to play with tension in terms of they build it up for 3 minutes and then you have the crescendo and that's it. And you get 3 minutes of that, build up, crescendo, end piece next. I feel like it's really cool for the single poem. I can't watch an hour of that. Right. I can't. because it gets too repetitive in terms of the flow of the piece, where you know where the next beat's coming. The subject matter might be different, but the presentation stays the same. With you, I've noticed, especially lately, because you've been writing more about self-love versus things that annoy you and frustrate you. I've noticed that I would love to hear like an hour-long set of Jeanette. And I'm wondering, this is the big wonder. Not supposed to ask questions that you don't know the answer to, but I'm going to do it anyway, as I've done frequently on this podcast. Are we going to get like a one-woman show with Jeanette?
That's so funny. Yes. I'm working on a lot of things. That's definitely something that it seems to be coming together naturally. So I'm working on this EP, and I feel like essentially that is the one-woman show. So it's just a matter of kind of, building those transitions and really kind of getting in that mindset. Because I think that I'll have to take on a little bit more of a theater mindset for that. Yeah. Which is new territory. Yeah.
And you've got people to help.
Yeah. Yes, I'm excited.
I love helping people with figuring out especially their first one.
Yeah.
Where they're like, I don't know what to do.
What to do with my hands?
Let's organize your stuff. And like make it work. And you mentioned, this is big news. Jeanette has an EP coming out with a lot of amazing music on it. Shout outs to Ferris, who lives out in Texas, who did all the instrumentation, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like beautiful backing music. I've gotten to hear a little bit of it. I got to hear a little bit of it while it's being recorded.
Yeah.
Be jealous, because wow. Like, sincerely, I'm not just saying that because she's sitting right in front of me. Beautiful work, as always.
Thank you.
But especially with that background music, it hits. I guess, is there like a time frame for you when you're looking to like put this out to the world?
Yeah, so we're hoping to, we've got a little time, but we're hoping to release a single in August. It's a really honest, a little bit of an edgier piece, but I'm excited for it. It's a good vibe.
Edgy in what way? Elaborate for listeners.
So even though I'm still using some metaphors, I'm pretty direct. And I think it's really easy to understand what I'm talking about. And just to be fair, it's called My Honest Poem. So I'm not going to give too much of it away, but it's a very honest poem. Yeah.
I like it. Well, I can't wait to hear that one. I don't think I've heard that one yet.
Not yet.
Yeah.
It's going to be pretty rad.
More things? Okay, cool. Perfect. And so we've talked a little bit about your growth path. We've talked a little bit about just how you approach the art. And I guess the logical next step I've got to go with this is, on this self-love journey, what's your next step?
Ooh. Wow.
Yeah.
You would make a great counselor.
I studied to be a psychologist.
I
wanted to be a priest as a kid, and then I went, you know what? The church doesn't do it for me. I'm going to be a therapist, and then I went into journalism for much same reason, and then I do poetry for much the same reason. So thank you.
Yeah. No, seriously. I think they're all kind of pretty related.
Did I just take a compliment?
You did.
Oh my God.
Okay, we're killing it.
We're working on it. We're working on it. We're doing this thing. I can be confident.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's your next like self-love journey? What's your goals, I guess?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know if I have like, by this date I want to do this. I think for me it's just allowing myself to be more vulnerable. Because I think when you feel like there are things that you can't share, or there are things about yourself that you have to kind of hide or muffle, if you will, it's you lose part of yourself, right? And then you have to ask yourself, well, why am I hiding that part? Oh, it's because I don't fuck with that part, because I don't love that part of myself, right? So instead of doing that, allowing myself to be honest. So a small example is when a friend really asks me how I'm doing, instead of saying, like I just did, right? Bad example, but instead of saying, I'm great, I'm wonderful. If I'm having a shitty day or a hard day, I'm like, hey, you know what, Agnes? I'm a mess today, but we're going to make it, right? So so I think that would be my first step, continuing to work on that vulnerability.
Yeah. And I mean, on that vulnerability side, even the fact that you're talking about being Black woman and identifying as queer, I didn't actually know you identified as queer until very recently.
Yeah.
And the fact that you're feeling comfortable and ready to like talk about it more is so beautiful. Which kind of begs the question, do you feel like there's a space in Sacramento where you feel comfortable being a woman, Black, and queer?
Yeah, most of Sacramento.
Really?
No, let me stop.
I was going to say, that's bullshit.
I mean, I think that's such a big part of, I'll be really honest, like the art scene, poetry, there's room for you. Yeah. To be all of those things. And I think, I know it was in the last interview, but I talked about, there were 3 places that really stood out to me. So Luna's, Sheba, and the Speak Out Sacramento. It's just mad love in each of those spaces. I think, Sheba is just so near and dear to me because it's the first place I ever spit. I love going in there and being like, ooh, I love being Black. This is great. I feel at home. This is comfortable. Luna's is just family. The only thing people actually really give a shit about is like, Ayo, are you a nice person? Yeah. Cool, you are? Great, welcome. Yeah. And then Speak Out Sac it's everyone's so unique and different. And I mean this in the most loving, most complimentary way. I tell people that's one place like, yo, everyone fits in because like no one fits in there, right? So those are my three spaces.
How'd you even get introduced to our poetry scene? Like, what made you come out? Because you went to Mahogany first. Yeah, that was the first place you ever went to. How'd you find out about Mahogany?
It's wild. Yeah. So my best friend, Erica Talbot, and if she's listening to this, Erica, I love you. Thank you so much. Was sharing, she sent me something, a YouTube, I think it was Button Poetry. She sent me a spoken word piece and I was like, "Ayo, this is dope." And then she said, "Hey, would you want to go check out some spoken word?" So I went. I went one night, and I didn't spit this night, but I remember going and hearing someone spit and thinking, "Oh shit, someone feels that way in a way that like I could relate to, and in the way that it's being presented." Feels very reminiscent of, hip hop, which is so near and dear to my heart, right? So I was like, this could be rad. And I've always liked to write. Yeah. So I went and I wrote a spoken word piece and I sat on it. I didn't share it for the longest time. I finally shared it with Erica. And long story short, that Wednesday I ended up at Mahogany for my first open mic. And that's kind of how I got into it.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. It's a whole journey and a whole adventure.
It's a cute little story.
And then from there, you found out about Most Open Mic in the city.
Yes.
How did you find out about that?
You know what? I feel like it was honestly Facebook.
Yeah.
Shout out to social media for doing good things sometimes.
Andrew with the Facebook ads.
Andrew. We love Andrew. Drew Bear. No, but I saw it on Facebook, and the concept was so cool. Still one of my favorites to this day. Showed up, and I don't know, like I feel like I have to tell this story, but for those of you who don't know, I show up at the Most Open Mic. I have my cute little poet notebook. This is before I had any confidence. And it's one of those things where you just go. There's no order. There's no real list, right? And so essentially I keep looking at my book and chickening out. I'm looking at my book. I'm like, I'm not going to do it. And this fool comes over and comes over and stands next to me, looks at me and is like, what did you say? You said something about sharing.
I think I said something like, do you have something you'd like to share with the class or something like that?
Yeah. And I was like, this guy.
It's my usual way of like coaxing people out because as someone I've hosted and been a part of more than 600 improv shows over the years on top of all of my spoken word experience. And I love hosting. I learned so much about just being able to read a crowd And my favorite moment is when someone wants to share, but they feel nervous. And so they start like, I don't know. And you just give them that little invitation. Just like, here, do with this however you feel. You're more than invited to come up. And then eventually, usually by the end of the night, usually near the end, they'll finally go like, you know what? If I don't do it now, I might not get to do it. And they just walk up and that was pretty much the story with you.
Yeah.
Because like I gave you the little invitation, the little nudge. And then I think I checked in on you one more time. And then it was like 5-10 minutes later, you just kind of like popped in. I was like, ah.
It was so good.
Because usually those are my favorite performances because it is something different that you've never heard before. Something that is really true and from the heart because someone who doesn't perform doesn't have the instinct to like, I'm going to appease the crowd.
Yeah.
So it's just going to be good or bad or whatever. It's here and it's honest and it's full blast. And I don't know. I just love the journey you've gone on with your poetry.
It's been
and yourself, your whole self, because you've had like a lot of personal change happen, especially lately. And, we don't need to get into it. It's a whole thing. And it's none of your business.
No, I mean, hey.
Well, if you want, no. I'm not about to make a podcast like that. So I guess we're coming towards the end of this. And I feel like, well, there's two things specifically that I want to ask. First of all is, what's something that you wish more people knew about you? I love that reaction.
You know what? I think we talked about this last time. I'm a really silly person. I'm a very silly person. And I think because I tend to be very shy and a little, until you get to know me, you don't see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and I mentioned this in our last time on the podcast too, there's a certain pressure, it feels like, from an outside perspective for Black women to be stoic and serious. And God forbid you show anything else or else there's an air of weakness to you. And I don't know, is there more to say on that?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. The whole concept of excellence can be a slippery slope, right? And again, because you are also, maybe whether or not you realize it, busy trying not to affirm negative stereotypes, it's really scary to present as anything else but on top of it. Truly it's scary to be silly, because then you worry like, oh, are people gonna think I don't have the intellect that measures up, right? Or are they gonna not take me seriously, or are they gonna think they can walk all over me? So you, at least for myself, I don't do it on purpose. But it is something that I'm definitely working on.
And does that come from personal insecurity, or does that come from the way you get treated out in the world?
I think both. Yeah. Truly. And again, we're, as a person of color, constantly striking that balance between, am I being hyper vigilant, sensitive, or like, is this really a thing? Right? And so I think it becomes a defense, right? If you kind of start to assume like, oh no, this is really a thing, like they're probably racist, your guard goes up. So if that is the case, you're not disappointed. Yeah. So then again, that goes back to like, I'm not going to be open and like giggle with you because I don't know if you're going to like try to come for me later.
Wow. And as someone who's familiar with it, it sounds a lot like similar symptoms to someone who's been gaslit. Yeah. 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 And you, as we've heard throughout the podcast and throughout many podcasts and many people who've shared their stories in our world, it's very much, that's what society does. It tells you that you've done something wrong, even though you haven't. It follows you. It encourages people to follow you in a store, even though you haven't stolen anything. It's active gaslighting.
I always tell people, it's like, but also you keep poking the bear, right? You treat people like they don't matter long enough, and you silence them long enough, and you push them into a corner long enough. Then
Yeah.
You'll catch these hands.
Yeah.
You catch this fade for sure. So yeah, that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, it's gaslighting, and also it reminds me a lot of the narcissistic versus codependent relationship, where it's exactly what you're talking about. Narcissist will push and push and push, and then when the codependent acts up, they'll suddenly go, "Oh, so you're just acting crazy now."
Yeah.
And how many times do we hear that in society?
Probably why the divorce rate is so high. Ooh.
I mean, yeah, like Americans in general, we just don't know how to talk to each other.
No.
And communication is so important. My first relationship was when I was 24. Get asked for relationship advice so much. And people go like, wow, you give amazing advice. And I'm like, 99% of the time, I'm just saying, have you talked to him? And people go like, no, I haven't talked to him. Why haven't you talked to him? Well, I mean, I just don't know how they'd react. So you're not comfortable opening yourself up. So is that a problem to you? And they go, well, I love him. That's not the question. Whether or not you love him, her, them, whoever, it doesn't matter. It's, are you able to be yourself around them, or are you stunting yourself?
Yeah. That part.
That's a whole tangent that I just went on.
No, but it's so real though, right? It's like everything else. It's a balance. And also on the flip side of that, I think communication, people assume it's just talking. It's actually listening. What would happen if you asked a question and then actually listened?
Yeah.
Like, but for real. Yeah.
And I hear the idea of listening, and I've been told I'm a good listener. I feel like...
Confirmed.
It feels weird to call myself I'm a good listener while I'm talking. At the same time, it's a weird thought. But, like, I guess, what are the keys for you for being a good listener? What does that mean? Because it's really easy to stare at someone and go, oh, wow. I think Chris Rock did a whole bit on that.
It's like when you check out, you're talking to a toddler. You're like, oh my goodness, what?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's so awful.
Oh my God, no, they didn't take your glue, right? Like, it's like wild.
So what does it mean to you to be like a good listener? What does active listening mean?
Being patient, and I mean what I mean by that is allowing someone to finish their complete statement. That is really hard when you're not seeing eye to eye. And sometimes people listen to respond. What if you listen and then actively practice not saying anything for like 30 seconds? So that's the kind of hype I'm on. Like and trying to strike the balance between not going back and forth with you and cancel culture, right? Because I'm not going back and forth with anybody, right? Like, if you want to talk to me, we can definitely have a conversation, but I'm not going back and forth with you.
Yeah, I mean, there is a certain point where it just becomes cyclical.
Yeah.
And it's very clear that it's cyclical. And at a certain point, you got to give up the fact that you can't change people. Well, you've got to accept the fact that you can't change people. You've got to give up on trying. And something that's helped me is the idea of I can really only be a point of exposure. Like, if I'm talking to someone who's a white supremacist, extreme example, I can't expect them to completely change themselves. It'd be nice. It'd be beautiful.
Right.
But what I can be is an example that they look back on later and go like, oh yeah, okay, that kind of made sense.
Carry the one, borrow the three.
Yeah, carry the one, borrow the three. And then they get another point of exposure and they're like, okay, maybe they're onto something. Yeah. And they finally get curious enough to they themselves look into it. Because I can't give you change.
Can't.
It's got to start from inside.
What?
I know, right?
Damn it.
But we get very focused. I think that's a big thing with cancel culture. That whole idea of like, you're not changed right now.
I'm out.
But it's also valid if someone's dangerous.
Right.
We need to, make sure that they're not in our shit.
Yeah, that part. And I think a lot of that has to do with your boundaries and your values, right? Because we all have non-negotiables.
Yeah.
Right? If you cross that non-negotiable boundary, you cancel you cancel forever,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You just crossed a gnarly line for me. I think, and like you said, you're not, and that's why I won't go back and forth with somebody.
Yeah.
Right? I can't change you. I could potentially give you something to think about, and I hope you can do the same.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, wow. Yeah. I'm going to cut over something completely different.
Sure.
Something I brought up on the last podcast, which I love bringing up because people don't realize this when they first look at you. You were very much influenced for a little while. Under the influence, we might say. But nothing illegal.
It should be.
Bodybuilding.
Sips Gatorade.
Sips Gatorade.
Literally.
Sips, what is that?
Literally Gatorade.
0G Gatorade.
Okay, get out of my face.
Not NAD. Bodybuilding,
Yeah.
which I didn't expect. And you'd been doing it for...
Yeah, I did it for 2 years.
2 years. And I guess part of your growth as a person, I noticed, like, that was a big shift in terms of how much you owned yourself. Mm-hmm. Was being able to go out and show yourself to the world in a way that you never had before. And I don't want to speak on your behalf for this, even though we already had the conversation. I could. Please tell me about just like what the atmosphere was like, what it did for you, etc. Just give me the full rundown.
Yeah. No, it's wild. It was such a great time in my life, but I'm also happy it's done. I learned a lot. I think what bodybuilding gave to me or helped me realize was, it's okay to walk in your power, and it's okay to shine. Like, those were two things that especially that shine part. Because growing up, I'm just trying to get to practice. I'm putting on jeans and a t-shirt. Like, that's not my thing, right? So I was never really comfortable with that type of attention. I'll be very honest. So that in so many, like, bodybuilding did that for me. But also, just practically speaking, if I can get on stage, I've said this before, pretty much naked, right? Because I'm in a bikini, knowing that people are literally there to judge my body and how it looks, right? If I can get on that stage and shine and rock it, I can most certainly get up on stage, speak my truth around people who came to listen to me or are there because they love me.
Wow, yeah. And see, I got to be honest, the first time that I heard you were doing bodybuilding, I had a reaction that I feel like is very... well, I feel like it's very common. I can't say for sure, but that bodybuilding, that's oddly superficial.
Oh, 100.
Yeah.
A lot. That's why I kept it from y'all fools for like 6 months. I didn't tell any of them I was bodybuilding.
But like superficial, but I was like really curious at that point. Like, why did she get into it? And seeing the depth of what you decided to take it from, do you feel like that's an aspect that everybody goes into bodybuilding with, or is that?
No. No, and I'll be honest. Honest. That's a big part of why I got out of it, because I went into it with this like mind, body, soul, right? I want to feel good. I want to look good, all the things, right? But then I got fixated on, I got nitpicky. Oh, how come I can't see this line here? Oh, is this a neck? I just stepped on the scale. It says I'm a pound over. That's not a way to live I don't want to live that way. And to people who are bodybuilding and want to bodybuild, hell yeah, you're a beast. It takes a special person.
Truth.
Because I like food with taste.
Yeah, I remember you'd tell me what your dinners were, and I'd be like, no, not in a million years.
No, I mean, what for a reward, like grapes was like a thing. I was like, oh my god, I get to have grapes today. It's like, what?
What a horrible life.
Yeah, it was an interesting time.
Yeah, but you grew so much out of it.
I did.
And there's so much to be said for, like, I'm just so excited to see where you're going to be going, both literally and metaphorically in the future. And yeah, thank you so much for being on here. I think that's we're over time as usual. I usually aim for 30 minutes, and like usual, I failed completely, but we had a great conversation, a great time.
Did.
So yeah, thank you again for being on here.
Thanks for having me.
I love your face.
I love yours.
And if you're out there, make sure you're taking care of yourself. And if you have a hard time taking compliments, you can do the work. It's okay.
And you're beautiful. Take that.
Damn straight. Bye.